Jonathan, hey, congratulations on your new film, The Comic Shop.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You know what? I love these independent films. I mean, and especially the fact that I could tell that you have a strong love for comic books. That's why you made it. But tell us this first. Where the original idea came from for The Comic Shop?
Yeah, so it really did come from being a big comic book fan, like as a kid, and right on through middle school, and just going to comic shops. I'd say at least once a week, but sometimes I dragged my mom a couple of times. And I knew this guy who owned a comic shop, and sort of as the years went by, he wasn't there as much, and he kind of wasn't as like passionate about it. And then one day the store closed, and so as an adult, I was kind of thinking through that and thinking how like as a kid I thought a comic store was like the coolest, most magical place. I loved it. And maybe for him though, it wasn't his passion. Like maybe that he just wasn't enjoying it as much. And then having run a small business myself, I knew like how much work goes into it, and that it's not all fun and games, even if it's a comic store. So then I kind of married a little bit of my present with this fictional idea and thought, what does it look like when somebody's kind of coming up on middle age and they're not doing what they really want to be doing? Because at the time, I was stuck in corporate work and
Mhm.
writing a script on the side. And so there was kind of like a real life Mike combined with Jonathan, combined with a lot of fiction.
Yeah, and you made a story that is a dying. I don't want to say a dying industry, but it is an industry that's been going up and down, and everyone in the comic book industry has been addressing it because comic book stores, it's the big heydays of the 90s. They used to be all over the place, and now you made a point in your film that is struggling to survive today.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're right, because it was right around the early 90s where I think the print runs were the highest. And people were collecting, so they were sometimes buying like three or four of the same issue if they were, like a variant cover, or if they just were a number one issue and they thought they might be valuable one day. But a lot of what made the old comics valuable is our parents threw them away. So those 1930s and 40s comics, they were not seen as collectible. They were seen as like newspapers, totally expendable. And so few of them survived. But once comics became like collectible, then everybody starts keeping them and putting them in their little sleeves. And pretty soon it's like, this isn't very rare, so it's not very valuable. And you're right, especially in the last month with Diamond going bankrupt. It's been even tougher on the small publishers, just trying to find an avenue to get in the stores. And Diamond owes a bunch of these companies money too, like six-figure, seven-figure totals. So it's been really rough out there.
I could tell you have a genuine love for comic books and collectibles because just looking around on your Zoom, I see there's a lot of collectibles all around your room already. So you are truly in this industry itself, right?
I haven't been a big comic reader since I was, younger, but like I've always been pretty like nerd culture. Like sort of comics eventually became Star Wars, and then I collected a bunch, as you can see, like, I have Star Wars stuff like even where you can't see kind of everywhere. And so yeah, I've always been into like collecting and sort of nerd culture. And I think as people just go from one thing to another, right? Like I started Marvel, and then it was like, okay, these comics are cool, but there's comic cards. So I bought them, and then it becomes Spawn, and then I got into Magic the Gathering for a while. So I've kind of dabbled in most most things along that line.
Yeah, don't we all? Don't we all? So Jonathan, let's talk about the movie magic. I mean, one of the things that you have to start off first in order to do the comic shop, you actually have to have a comic shop in the first place. So tell us about the production set, creating a comic shop for your film.
Yeah, that was actually, I'm glad you asked that. I feel like no one's asked that. So that was a big point of discussion early is, do we build this comics shop? Because we're going to be in here so much of the movie. Do we just build it on the set so we have, total control? Or do we go find one? And I think we waffled quite a bit on that. Like we started looking at the locations and, some places they don't want you there, especially when you tell them like, hey, we're going to need to take over your store for like 8 days. I think it was 8 full days.
Hmm.
And finally we found a store that really it had the size that we needed, where what we shot in the movie was actually only about half the store, which allowed us to put the gear on the other half. And they were so awesome. The only thing they told us, because we were shooting in November, like end of November and December, is he said, you can't shut my store down on Black Friday because that's a big deal for us. But you can start the next week. And so we said, hey, no problem. And then, of course, the other big thing is finding the rival comic store, because the thing is, we knew Mike's store looks kind of crappy. Like
Mhm.
it's not supposed to look too upscale. And when you see it, you're supposed to think, man, this place isn't much. But the rival has to look super impressive. Like not a little bit better, not even twice as good, like 10 times as good at least. So when we went into this other store, it's actually owned by the drummer for System of a Down, and he has I think three or four of them. There's a couple in Southern California, so it really is a chain, just like it is in the movie. And I walked in, and I see the life size like AT-AT, the Silver Surfer, and even the ceiling tiles were like X-wings and Superman, and I mean the detail in that store was amazing. So the second we walked in, I was looking at the producers and I was like, I don't care what it costs, we have to get this store. Like this is the rival store.
Wow. And how did you wanted to fill up the store with some of these fictional comic books that how did you pull it off, the creation of the fictional comic books and the artwork that that you displayed throughout your entire film?
Yeah, so the artwork was from a number of artists. We had so some of Mike's work, I think, was from a guy named Paul, and he kind of like loaned us a certain number of his sketches that we could use as Mike. And then he did a couple of the sketches for Mike, like for the movie. So because the script is very specific about like what we need to have and what he's drawing. So Paul gave us like some old stuff and created some new. And then we had a guy named Travis, who his story is kind of funny because it's very much like Mike. Just before I hired him, he was working as an assistant manager at a Walmart, and he quit the Walmart to go to pursue comic art full time. And so I was like, that is cool, because when I hired him, I said, you are Mike. This movie is you, basically. So he did Techno Man and those three covers that we had, as well as like the inserts. And Techno Man is really, central to the story. And then for all the rest of the stuff, I wrote to indie comic publishers and said, hey, I'm doing this movie. I'm the writer director, and I want to make this about you guys. Like I want to highlight like independent comics, not Marvel and DC. Is there any way that you could, send me some comics? Is there, that we'd be cleared for the movie? And of course, it's the indie world, so it's a little funny. Like one of the publishers was actually like, "Oh, we can send you these and we can clear them, but like we have to charge you for them because they're so
Mhm.
small." And I said, "It's no problem. Like I'm happy to pay for them. It's not a big deal. Like I just want to know that it's okay to use them in the movie and be legally cleared for it." So they were all really nice, and it was great because I needed a certain number of comics you're always seeing in the background and where the characters pick up. And so it was really
Mhm.
like a combined effort of some creation and some like getting licensed.
Now in the film, Mike's comic shop is based in Las Vegas. Was this where you actually filmed that too?
Yes, so we filmed all in Las Vegas, and it was almost all in sort of like, I guess what I describe as old Las Vegas. It's an area that's just west of the Strip, and the part of the reason for that is I don't know, people know this, but Las Vegas is very much of an HOA city. Like we don't have communities here that aren't gated pretty much. They're
Mhm.
all gated, they're all HOAs. And the only places you can go are like old Vegas and Northwest Las Vegas to find places that don't have an HOA. So like Brandon's house, you're not going to be able to film that in an HOA without just massive red tape and them telling you like make security deposits and contributions to them. So we kind of were like, let's live in this area. Like we can get all of our locations in this area that we're never more than about, I'd say 10 minutes from the next nearest location. The only exception of that was the bowling alley and the convention scene, which those were in North Las Vegas actually, which the area where it is isn't the nicest, but like it was great having use of the Silver Nugget Casino.
You must have a delightful time trying to recreate San Diego Comic Con or what I like to when I was watching is like San Diego Mini Con for your film.
I Yeah, and so a big thing about that is the writing as well. Like I had to write it like this goes with Mike's characters. Mike is lazy and he's also just doesn't have the money. So by the time he's went to sign up for like a booth at San Diego, my thinking was that the main hall is already sold out. Like he missed the boat on that. And this is some like crappy auxiliary hall that was probably not really intended for, much to be there. And so that's why Mike kind of gets stuck in the back. But that was one of the toughest things we did because we would have loved to just like go to San Diego, like get a
Hmm.
have the cast and crew there. But then we start pricing this out and realizing like we're in December. I mean, we'd have to wait till next July just to film this. And how are we going to get Jesse Metcalfe back? And how are we going to get, Trevor Einhorn and like all these other people? And I did that on my first movie. We had a big scene that we just did not have a way to film during the regular production. So we said, well, we'll do it later in a pickup. And it took from June until September to find one day where all the cast was available. So I didn't really want to like cross that bridge again. But production design is sitting there trying to make this look as good as possible in the convention. And they needed more and more material. So some of the stand-ups that we used are actually the guy who did Technoman. It's his other comic series, I think called like Shinju or something.
Hmm.
And so we were really able to ask people, do you know anyone who does comic stuff? And would they contribute some of their work, to filling out this convention space, basically?
I was going to say you had to do some creative recruitment to recreate a convention for your film.
Yeah, those are the things where your budget is most constrained because, when you're shooting in like Mike's little shop that, it's supposed to be small and not very impressive, then budget isn't really much of an issue because, we have what we need to do it. But then when you get to something like, oh, okay, they're going to San Diego and this is like a pivotal part of this journey, then how do we make sure this doesn't kill the movie when you get there? Like it has to look good. And getting a lot of extras and having them bring costumes and things like that was important. But then it was also challenging because like, well, we can't use licensed costumes. Like we can't have somebody dressed like Wolverine or somebody else like Deadpool. And I thought, oh man, this is harder than I thought it would be. So it's like off-brand like costumes.
Now, one of the clever things I like what you did was there was a point where Mike was actually teaching how to do artwork, and you did sort of an animation in that
Yeah.
film. Can you tell us how you pulled that off?
Yeah, so that was our tough one. That wasn't in the original script that I wrote because I don't know that much about effects and the producers kind of I really appreciate they kind of pushed me into that and said, why don't we do something like this? Because you keep talking about how Mike sees this in his mind, but like what if we could see it as the audience? And I thought, well that sounds great, but I mean, can we do that? Can we afford to do that? And they said, yes, as long as we keep it to just a couple of shots. And I think originally we had 3 shots, there was another one in the park, but what we realized is that the park one didn't really make sense. Like, didn't really accomplish much. So we kept it to the teaching scene so that we could see like how does Mike's mind work? Like, how does he come up with these weird ideas out of the blue? And then we had to use like tennis balls to kind of they hold the position of like where the monster is going to be. And so we had the effects guy on set, and he just tells us like what to do, and you get some like still frames so that you can basically know for point of reference where these things are, how big everything is, and then it took a long time in post to finish, even though I know they're such small shots. The lighting detail on them. And I thought that another thing that like worked in our favor for that is that they don't need to be photorealistic. Like
Yeah.
if it's like, oh, it doesn't look like exactly like a Marvel movie. Yeah, but in the Marvel movies, those characters are actually there. Like, you have to see this alien because the alien's real. In ours, these aren't real. These are just in our characters' imaginations. So if it looks a little bit animated, good. It should look a little animated because that's how it's going to be on the comic book page. So it was
That that is
fun.
that is true. You pulled it off. Now, now, Jonathan, we have to talk about your cast. You mentioned Jesse a few times. I mean, I'm impressed that you have Jesse and Tristin, both well-known actors into your film, and I have to remark they're way too good looking to work at a comic book shop. But tell us about your cast for this film.
I know. Actually, I will say as a side note, that's really funny. I just told my wife that last night. I said, the only thing that, like, the thing that is most unrealistic about the comic shop is that Mike would ever fire Tristin Mays. Because if you had a girl at your comic store who looked like that, then all the nerds would be in there like all the time. You wouldn't even need to worry about the competition or like what's going on. So with Jesse, we had a list from a distributor of like, here's names that kind of move the needle for us. Like, these people add value to the project and will help guarantee the investment. And I don't know, some of the names to me didn't really make a lot of sense for the role. I thought, yeah, I don't know, he'd be good, but that's not really what I'm going for. And some of them are really good actors too, even like a John Heater or something like that. But I didn't see the movie as mainly funny, so I worried that it becomes Napoleon Dynamite meets Clerks, and that's not really like the movie.
Hmm.
So when we got to Jesse, I thought I can actually really see this because I hope he doesn't mind me saying, but Jesse is the kind of person who reached like a fairly meteoric level of fame back early in his career when he was on Desperate Housewives and John Tucker Must Die. And then things kind of, they went a little sideways after that. Like he's always been a really hardworking actor, but I don't think he got that like linear rise that he would have wanted, where it's like one awesome thing building on another. So I thought Jesse's gonna bring that like that personal experience to this role, and he wants to move up, just like Mike does. Like he yearns for that passion and success that he had. So I really thought that would work. We were actually fortunate that like Jesse I think he had like a shoulder injury or something, and he wasn't in his best shape when he filmed Comic Shop. If you see him on Instagram now, he is in incredible shape. Like, I don't know, the guy's working out a couple hours a day. But it benefited our movie that even though, yeah, he's Jesse, he's still really good looking. At least he wasn't at his like absolute peak. And then Tristin was kind of funny because we made a couple other offers, not many. And one of the actresses said she didn't really understand it. She didn't really get comic books, and that's fine. And then we were just talking like, who could we offer? And I asked the producer, I said, during the pandemic, I watched the reboot of MacGyver. I love the original MacGyver. I'm like a huge fan. I used to watch it 2 times a day when I was a kid, reruns on USA Network. And so I said, have you guys heard of Tristin Mays? And one of the producers said, yeah, we've heard of her. She's really good. And they said, well, I don't know if she's like too big. Is she too big for us to offer for this? I don't really know. And they said, well, it doesn't hurt to try. And so we made her an offer and she accepted in 48 hours. So I was really excited to have her aboard because I thought her character in MacGyver is kind of that same feistiness or like I don't know that tomboy sort of appeal that would really work for this role. Um, but yes, you're right. Like they're both like we had the comic shop owner actually, the guy who owns Mike's. He said that to them. He said, I've been working in comics for about 20 years, and I don't see a lot of people who look like you two. Just saying, it was kind of funny. But I'm like, I just looked at him. I said, "Hey, that's Hollywood, you know."
That is true. That is true. You know what? It works. It will draw people to watch it, and that's what actually counts. Well, Jonathan,
Right.
I've taken a lot of your time already. So, what's next after the comic shop with you?
Yeah. So, I mean, right now I'm really just trying to get this thing out there and hope it's a success so I get another chance, sort of like Mike. But I've got a number of scripts that are actually done, and I've got a couple ideas I'm interested in. I will say a few of them are kind of in the horror genre, but like they're like thoughtful horror is what I would say. If you look at something like The Substance or Heretic, I like the ability of horror to explore societal issues or critique things that it kind of goes under the radar because people will say, "Oh, it's just a horror movie," but horror movies have a history of being pretty subversive and making commentary on things that like you don't usually say anything about. So I've got this one horror film that I won't like spoil anything about it because it's not even totally written, but I want to kind of lampoon the wellness industry, and I wanted to make like where there's like a cult, and they've just taken the whole like wellness and woo woo and all that stuff like way too far, and it's become something that's no longer about health but just kind of scary.
Ooh.
And so it's kind of one of those like where four young people are like, "Yay, we're going to a wellness retreat," and then things really go sideways from there. So that was kind of like one of the things. But I've got a couple. I've got another script finished as well that sort of deals with the importance of memory. It's like something where they're trying to rehabilitate criminals by like imprinting a new mind, almost like new memories. And the idea is that, well, if we could turn these people into like regular people, then maybe they could be rehabilitated and released. But as of course happens in movies like Jurassic Park, things go wrong and nature finds a way to come out and play. So that was another idea, but yeah.
Well, you have plenty of ideas. I mean, your wellness story, because I drive to Vegas once in a while, and I always stop by that weird exit, the one the
Oh
ZZYZ,
yes, yeah.
which and the history of that used to be a wellness center back in the 1950s, and it turned out to be it was a con. It was
Oh, nice.
yeah, it was basically sort of like a Christian wellness center, but the guy was from Hollywood, and he was just all he was doing was just was conning people, and then it was supposed to be like like a natural hot spring, but it turned out to be that they actually had like boiling water and all.
Oh,
So if you look into the history of it, because the it still
I mean,
exists today.
oh yeah.
But it's a scientific center now or something like that. So it's just a bunch of scientists out there. But yeah, if you read it, that story is just bonkers out in the middle of the desert. But yeah.
Oh, man, that's the thing is we should go film this new version there. And because I was always thinking like it could be doesn't have to be all established. It could be a bunch of yurts out in the middle of the desert or like something
Yeah.
weird creepy like that. So I'll look into that more though. That sounds really funny.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, Jonathan, I really appreciate it, but I want to leave with one last thought though.
Sure.
The Technoman art, did you have to return that to the artist, or do you have the only copies of it?
No, I have the copies. Actually, let me see if I've got these ones actually here, and I had Jesse and Tristin like sign one of them.
Well,
So Techno Man is ours, which is so funny that you say that because I was just thinking like this is the dumbest thing. So just being goofy, but it was like if this movie was a success, we could have like Techno Man T-shirts or something like that. And people are like, "What's Techno Man?" It doesn't even really exist, but yeah, I definitely wanted that. And the other cool thing was my cinematographer made me this guy.
Oh wow. Okay.
It's the clapper board for the clapper that keeps time code, and you can have them like custom made. So he made this like little Technoman version, which was that kind of stuff was really fun. Like I'm all about collecting a couple like memories from each movie, and something that can, I don't know, remind you of the times on set. So
You did it, and you are definitely a collector, Jonathan. Thank you very much to talk about the comic shop, and I really appreciate the fact that you followed your dreams, and that's what counts.
well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and absolutely, it's a tough process, but it was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun speaking to you about this movie, Jonathan. So hopefully we get to do this again. Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you. Bye
Bye.
now.